other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
You know, when we place our faith in something or someone and we're betrayed or let down, generally we're embarrassed. We feel cheated. We may be heartbroken or confused and disillusioned. Probably most of you here have experienced that at some point in your lives. The disciples had given up everything for Jesus. Their jobs, their friends, their homes, their families, everything. They had spent 3 years of their lives tramping all over Israel and Palestine. They'd gone without food, perhaps shelter, certainly rest. They had been frightened for their lives more than once. And now, the ultimate thing, the final straw. Jesus hadn't destroyed the power of the Romans. The Romans and the religious leaders, their own Jewish brothers, plotted together to find a way to have Jesus killed. And yet, this very morning, there had been a new ray of hope. Mary had come running, saying that the tomb was empty, and Jesus had indeed risen from the dead. She had even seen Jesus. The disciples were elated. Likely they began planning for what they would do next. Yet, by nightfall, they still hadn't seen Jesus. He'd said he would come to them. Where was he? And so a new reality began to sink in. Maybe Mary just thought it was Jesus. Maybe Jesus had been recaptured by the authorities. Maybe their excitement had been for nothing. Then another thought began to form in their minds, a really scary thought. They were known as Jesus' supporters and followers. Everyone knew who they were. This was fine when Jesus had the support of the people as he performed miracles and healed the sick. But now, logically, they were the next in line to suffer the same fate that Jesus had. And so on Easter evening, the disciples are not out celebrating. Oh no. They're closed tight and locked in a room for fear of the authorities. Except Thomas, that is. That night, the disciples may have been expecting a very gentle rap on the door as Thomas arrived to join them. They may have expected and feared the sound of the Roman soldiers and pounding on the door. But they surely weren't expecting what happened next. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, there stood Jesus. No door or window was opened. No knock on the door was answered. And yet, there was Jesus. Another miracle. But this one, especially for the disciples. Jesus had entered the room as the Son of God, knowing no boundaries. You can imagine the shock of the disciples. It isn't any great wonder that Jesus' first words to them were, "Peace be with you." He needed to calm down. after the exhaustion of emotional stress that they'd experienced, tired from a lack of sleep, the sadness of losing Jesus, and the disappointment that he wasn't the Messiah, maybe. Maybe they were imagining things when they saw him. So to prove to them that he wasn't some sort of an illusion or a ghost, Jesus showed them his hands and his feet, his side that had been pierced by the soldier's sword. You know, the disciples thought that they had understood who Jesus was, but they certainly hadn't understood everything that Jesus had talked about. They didn't believe or want to believe the part about how he had to suffer and die. Nobody thought it would really happen, but it did. And now, like he had also said, he had risen and returned to them. The disciples finally had their aha moment that night, as everything was now made clear to them through this moment of grace. As we know, the only problem was that Thomas was not with them. When they told Thomas about Jesus' return, that they had seen him, he didn't believe them. How could that be? They were all trusted friends who had been through so much together, and yet he refused to believe them. He insisted, in fact, that he would have to see for himself. He would actually have to touch Jesus. Guys, lest you forget, the other morning when Mary had come and told you that Jesus was back, what did you do? You ran to the tomb to see for yourselves, remember? You know, doubt is that dirty little secret that is so often kept by churches. If a person in church says that they have doubt, everyone thinks that they're weak. People form a new image of that person, not quite such a righteous one. I had a friend in Houston years ago, dear old Shirley Jean. She was a devout Episcopalian, Father forgive me. She never missed a Sunday, and I attended with her several times. At that time, it felt pretty much like empty ritual to me. You can imagine my surprise when one day Shirley started attending a little country church. I've never seen such a dramatic change. I'll never forget the day that she said to me, "The Bible says it, and I believe it, and that's all there is to that." Shirley had become a fundie. Friends, I'm sorry, but I call that empty faith. I look at that as someone who really hasn't taken their faith seriously enough, just blindly accepting the faith of others. I would rather stand with Thomas and ask for more information. I would rather question, ponder, spend some time in thought and prayer before deciding what I believe. You know, doubt gives us the strength to be open with others about the challenges and the struggles that we all have in our lives of faith. Have you ever considered that maybe doubt is a gift for all of us? Teresa of Avila, that mystical saint who spent much of her life in contemplative prayer and deep, deep relationship with God, once said, "Lord, I don't love you. I don't want to love you, but I want to. I think those would be my words as well, along with the words of the Father who brought his Son with the evil spirits to Jesus to be healed. He said, "Lord, I believe, help my unbelief." Let's be honest here. Some days we have faith to move mountains, and other days we find it hard to believe at all. But these times of doubt, these times of questioning help us to grow. Questions are good things. They mean that we care enough to spend time thinking about something and wrestling with it. We doubt because we hope and want something to be true. Maybe we need more people to doubt and ask questions. When I was in seminary, I was at the ripe old age of 45 when I went. I was determined to learn everything I could as I embraced this calling from God. I wanted to know what I was talking about if I was going to speak on behalf of God to others. So I always asked a lot of questions in class. I wanted to be clear on what was being taught. I wanted to be sure that I understood what the professor meant. Many, many times after class, a student would come up to me and thank me for asking a question. You see, they also wanted to know, but they didn't want to ask the question. They were young and their egos wouldn't allow it. They were too concerned about what others might think of them. I admired Thomas. He was honest. He questioned. Thomas was called Thomas Didymus in the Bible. Didymus means twin. He was Thomas the twin. I don't know who his twin was, we're not told. But perhaps it's time for each of us to embrace the Thomas in us, rather than being embarrassed by it. In fact, from now on, I think that when I talk about Thomas, I'm going to call him Thomas the twin. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to start calling him Thomas my twin. Amen.